Hey, Bryce. Hey, Christy. Welcome to the His and Her Money Show.
Hey, you guys.
Hi, thanks so much for having us.
We're super glad to have you guys here because you're going to help us think a little differently when it comes to retirement. I think when we think about retirement, we have a certain preconceived notions and ideas about how to get there and what that should look like. But you guys have debunked a lot of those preconceived notions with your own life. And so we're glad to have you guys here to kind of share a bit of your story. But before we jump into the journey that you all have been on, can you just say hello to everyone that's tuned in right now and let them know what you are all about?
For sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Christy.
And I'm Bryce.
And we are the co-authors of Quit Like a Millionaire and co-founders of the blog millennial-revolution.com.
Awesome. That is one heck of a title.
Quit like a millionaire.
Quit Like a Millionaire. So let's talk about that. Let's just talk about the concept a bit. Where did that come from? What was that idea birthed out of? Talk to us about what the concept of quitting like a millionaire is all about.
For sure. Okay, so the background of the book is that originally we didn't actually set out to write a book. It was actually, I got an email from an editor from Penguin saying, would you like to write a book? And my initial thought was like, this is a scam, right? There's no way an editor from Penguin wants me to write a book. So I was like stalking her on LinkedIn and all this stuff to make sure it's a real person. And then so we actually had a call with her and we found out that one of her clients, who's a Hollywood actress, was like a fan of our blog and had just referred her to our blog. And then after she read it, she thought we could write a book. This would be a really good idea. And then even after talking to her, I'm like, should I really write a book? Like, I mean, I didn't do anything special. Like I didn't start like a multi-million-dollar company. I didn't really, make a big investment in one stock that took off. Like, why would anyone want to read this story? And then from talking to her, we talked a bit about my background, like how we came to this journey. And then she thought it was really interesting because my life actually spans like the three different parts of the economic spectrum, which is growing up in poverty, going into middle class, and then finally becoming rich. So she thought that like what an interesting way to tell your story if you did it from the journey of at one point. So we were living in China at one point, and my family was living on 44 cents a day. Like from that to becoming a millionaire, that's where the Quit Like a Millionaire comes from. Because it's, the idea that you could go from like the bottom 1% to the top 1%, and how do you go about doing that? So that's where the idea of the book came from. It was us not setting out to write a book, but then Penguin actually coming to us and asking us if we wanted to write a book.
I think that's one of the most amazing parts of your story is that you didn't, have this idea that turned into Facebook like Mark Zuckerberg, or you didn't invest at Amazon when it was a brand new company and now you're just reaping the benefits. I don't want anybody to miss this. You, at one point in your childhood, your family was living on 44 cents a day.
Yeah.
You went from that to becoming a millionaire. And I want to be clear, because sometimes you get advice from people like you have business coaches who've never actually had a business. You have credit repair people who have bad credit themselves. The reason that Bryce and Christy are qualified to talk about this is because they did this. You all retired in your early 30s, correct?
Right. She was 31, I was 32, and to our knowledge, we're the youngest people in Canada to have done this. So it was quite a journey.
Wow. So where did the thought that you could retire early? I mean, some people talk retire early and that means 50 instead of 65. You guys were 31 and 32 years old. At what point in your life did it seem like a feasible goal to go after where you could invest and save up enough money and do certain things with your money that would allow you to retire at such a young age?
It was actually a gradual process. Like originally I was just thinking, I'm going to follow the usual status quo of like, get the degree, buy a house, work until you're 65, and then retire with a pension. That was my normal plan. That plan kind of fell flat after we started looking around our area and realized that houses, like the average family home, was over $1 million. then I was like, you know what? Maybe I don't want to do that. Maybe I don't want to be in debt for the rest of my life. And then I had an epiphany one day when one of my coworkers actually collapsed and almost died at his desk from overwork. He had been working 14-hour days for multiple years on end. And then he was rushed to the hospital. And then the emergency room doctor said that if it had been half an hour later, he would have died. So it was just like a really big wake-up call. And then what really scared me even more afterwards was that he took a week off work and then he came back to work like nothing had happened, because, you know, he had all these bills to pay and he was like really embedded into that status quo thinking, which is like, I have to work because if I stop and the money doesn't come in anymore, I'm going to be screwed, right? So at that point, I started to think like this, you know, status quo type of path of like working until you're 65. Am I even going to make it until I'm 65? Like, I don't even think I'm going to make it. This doesn't make any sense. And like knowing that my dad, when we lived in China, like we lived under a totalitarian government. And then at one point before I was born, my dad was in a labor camp for 10 years. So like going from that and then escaping and then immigrating to the West and being, you know, able to like pull ourselves out of poverty and going to middle class, only to die at my desk before the age of 65, that's not worth it. I didn't want to do that anymore. And then so we looked at is there another path that we can follow? Is there a path to freedom instead of working until we die at our desks? So then that was the point where we discovered financial independence, retire early. At the time, it wasn't really a movement. Now it's kind of turned into a movement with like all different people from all different backgrounds, people with families. Back then it was mostly reading from Pete's blog, Mr. Money Mustache, and JL Collins, Learning How to Invest, is an investment series. So at that point I was like, maybe there's a way to do this. And then Bryce was like doing the calculations. Yeah, maybe you can tell me.
She was more into the kind of like saving, like, you know, the fact that she came from poverty and the fact that she came from not having a lot meant that she was really, really good at saving money. So I always keep saying that Christy's mind is like a steel trap for prices, you know? Like when we walk into a grocery store, I have no idea how much a pound of apples is supposed to cost, but she does, right? So she's naturally just kind of, oh, I can use a coupon there, I can get this for cheaper and all this kind of stuff. So she's saving up all this money, but there really wasn't much of what we were going to do with that money was just buy a house and be like everybody else. And I was exploring all these ideas about like, hey, what do we do? Like, what other options do we have? Do we invest in this kind of stuff? So so the housing market in a big city like Chicago or New York has been crazy for a really long time, and it's been unaffordable ever since we've been, you know, working. And it got to the point where like every time we would save up $50,000 towards a down payment, the houses that we were looking at would have gone up by $50,000. So it felt like we were just chasing a guidepost that kept moving away from us. And because we were so like diligent and trying to save up this down payment, by 2012, our down payment fund had grown to $500,000. And we were kind of going, okay, this is kind of a lot of money. What do we want to do with this, right? And our options were literally, okay, I could take this $500,000, buy $1 million house, go into $500,000 of debt, and then pay that off for the next 25 years. Or if I invest this, we could potentially be millionaires within 3 to 4 years and retire. So it's like, okay, 25 years of debt or 3 or 4 years to complete freedom. And we're like, well, that's a stupid decision. Let's do that.
I didn't even believe him when he was like, let's do the numbers. Oh, look, it looks like we can retire in 33 years. I was like, ha, 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 your math is wrong. I was like, there's no way this is possible. I just did not believe him at all. But then, you know, as we actually had a goal to reach, instead of just, you know, running around and looking at houses, it got closer and closer. And then you get that, like, you know, you get very happy looking at your goals and reaching them, and then it gets faster and faster. And then it actually happened. And I was just amazed that we actually made it. Because when you're first starting off, saving up the first $10,000, saving up the first $50,000, that's really, really hard. But as you start doing, but as your money grows, as the amount of money that you've saved up grows, it starts to grow faster because it starts to compound and it starts to start making money on its own. As well, at the time that we were progressing in our careers, but we were still living in like
like, you know, just a top floor of a house, like an apartment. And so we weren't inflating our costs at the same rate. Like we weren't inflating our costs at all, but our income was going up. So the amount that we were able to put away each year started to increase. And so when we first started off, we were saving maybe about 50% of our incomes. We were living quite frugally, but as our incomes increased, our savings rate actually went up to like 60, and at one point it was hitting around like 70%. And then at the same time, when I added investing into it, it then started to compound at even faster rate.
Yeah.
So we end up hitting our $1 million target like in 3 years, and at that point we kind of went, I guess we're done, because the whole one of the big key insights of the FIRE movement is that when your retirement date is not actually based on your age, it's based on how much money you have versus how much money you spend. So we have this rule of thumb called the 4% rule, which basically states that if you take your how much you're spending to live on and you multiply that by 25, that's how much money you need to retire in order to sustainably spend that forever. So we were spending about $40,000 as our living expenses. $40,000 times 25 is $1 million. So if you have $1 million, you can safely withdraw $40,000 or 4% of that every year, inflation adjusted, and it's going to last. It's going to statistically last forever. So once we hit that, we thought, I think this means we can retire now. And that was 4 years ago, and we're still going strong, and it's been an unbelievably amazing journey.
This is amazing, like amazing. I want to back up a little bit and thank you for being so transparent, because I know that listeners are probably like, okay, you did what? So let's back up a little bit. How long did it take you guys to actually save up $500,000? And what you said was so very, very true. Usually it's very difficult to save up like the first 10,000 or the first 50,000. But once you kind of get that ball rolling and your money's making money off of itself, then then you can definitely grow it a lot quicker. So was your plan of attack, were you guys taking the money that you all were saving and putting that away into a mutual fund or an investment? And how long did it take you guys to actually save that 500,000?
Okay, so we broke down like all the math and all the numbers in the Appendix B in our book, Quit Like a Millionaire, so you can actually see like all the graphs. But in general, like around 6 or 7 years is how long it took us to save that. And the thing is, like, we weren't just putting it all into a savings account at the time, because as you will see from the book, we actually made a really big mistake like during that period of time, because we actually invested in 2008. That was our first experience in learning to invest. And at one point, like, we're looking at the computer and just putting in $1,000 one day, and the next day it would just be gone, right? And coming from a scarcity mindset, that was not fun for me at all, because I was like, oh my God, what if it all goes away? What if it goes to zero? Like, we have to sell everything. This could feed my entire village back home. Are you nuts? Like, why are we doing this? So
I remember viscerally, like my finger hovering over the sell all button, and I was like, this really feels scary. Because at the time they were screaming that this was the global financial collapse. This was like everything was going to go to hell. But the thing about the strategy that we chose, which is index investing, you don't buy individual stocks, you buy the entire stock market. And the thing about that is that there's an inherent safety to that, because there's no way. So if you buy individual stocks, it is absolutely possible for your portfolio to go all the way to zero, because if the 3 or 4 companies that you picked all go bankrupt, that's it, you're done. But in order for the index to go to zero, all companies have to go to zero. And the only reason why that would happen, that would never happen unless, like, you know, the aliens have invaded and everything's on fire. And then it doesn't matter what your portfolio is. The guy then the only currency that matters is shotgun shells, right? So it's like, it doesn't matter at that point. So we knew that the correct thing to do here was, because the index and the economy always recovers in some way, shape, or form. As 2008 was happening and the stock markets were plummeting, we kept buying into it. You only lose money when you index invest if you sell at a loss. The good thing to do is to hold, and the best thing to do is to buy more. So we kept buying more. So what we were doing, which was the scariest, most unintuitive thing ever back then, which is we kept taking money from our jobs and then throwing it into the stock market as it was plummeting. And as she was saying, as we would put in $1,000 and then the next day it would drop by $1,000. So it just seemed like we were just setting money on fire. But what we were doing at that point was picking up more units of the index funds as they were dropping at a lower price, where you were getting more and more and more of it. So as a result of it, when it finally hit the bottom in like early 2009, we had a lot of units that we owned, and we were able. And when it started to rebound, we felt the rebound more strongly than we actually felt the drop, because we had more units at the bottom. And even though the stock market recovered, like technically in something around like 2012, we got all our own money back sometime in late 2009. So like this strategy of index investing is actually really, it's actually a lot safer than you think it is. People think that buying a house is safe because, you know, you can feel the wood and you can knock on the bricks and that's the real thing, versus the stock market is this ethereal thing that's just like numbers on a spreadsheet. But by using index investing, we were able to not lose money in the great financial crash of 2008. And I don't think most of Wall Street investors can say that.
Yeah. Wow. And wow, because I'm like, okay, if that was us, because in 2008 we invested in real estate. We picked up our first rental property, and that was like the worst decision ever. So I can only imagine putting money into index funds and seeing it disappear. I would probably be like, Tyler, we gotta run. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So my gosh. So I guess it definitely takes the other partner to be like, hey, no, let's keep going, because I think I would have probably been screaming like,
yeah, and you have to have a long range view.
Right.
Oh, yeah, for
That's
sure.
I'm so happy you guys shared your story, because to hear somebody that actually went through that but actually benefited from it in the long run is amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So did you guys have like a multi-fold approach to this? Of course, you increased your income on your jobs. And was there anything else that you guys did to really maximize the amount of money that you were able to throw away into your index funds?
I think not buying a house is a big part of it, because it was really hard not to buy it because everybody around us was buying houses. And the thing is, like, people would buy it without even thinking about how much it's going to cost them to maintain the house. They would just be like, oh, I just bought $1 million house. Like they bought a sweater. Oh, I just bought $1 million house. It's going to go up, because houses always go up. Like even my own mother, who used to like beat me for losing a pair of keys that would cost $30 to replace and clipping coupons, was like, you got to get into the market. If it's $1 million and you're going to get into debt, go buy it now, because it's always going to go up, right? And that mindset is just really toxic. And if we had gotten into that, I would have been like my friends who were really stressed out, like my coworker who was, you know, trying to pay the bills and then working crazy hours. Because what people don't realize is that it's not just the mortgage. They're just like looking at the mortgage calculator, like it's the same as rent, so I'm making money. No, there's a lot of other costs that come with it. Maintenance, property taxes, insurance, like land transfer tax, all these crazy costs that people don't think about. And all I heard while we were renting a place that's relatively, you know, like it wasn't super far from downtown, but it wasn't like a condo that you could walk to everything. It was about 25 minutes by subway ride. Our rent was $850. Everybody else was constantly complaining about, oh, I just spent $5,000 because of the roof. I just spent $10,000 because something happened with my basement. It's just constant, you know, these chaotic things that happen, and then you're just out money like this, right? And when people say, oh, my house has gone up this much money, they don't actually sell it. They just end up buying another house. So it's like, we realized that by evaluating it and doing the math, we actually came out ahead, because we didn't have all these emergency costs of something breaking with the house that would consist, not just cause us to like bleed money by trying to fix the house. It would have taken up more time from our careers. Like one of the things that we did was increase our salaries. Like we had at least 2 or 3 promotions during that time to be able to save that money, because we could put all our time into projects that were risky that other people couldn't do, because they, you know, if it went bad and they got laid off, they have a house to support. For us, it was just like, take the risk, increase your salary, get that promotion, put everything into this career rather than be running around trying to like, you know, maintain your house. So
I think a lot of it actually came from the scarcity mindset that Christy had by growing up poverty, because she's a deeply pessimistic person.
Yes.
Right? She is always under the assumption that everything's going to go to shit at any point. And so she was deeply skeptical of people going into the housing market, because there was, you know, there's the hype of what people say, and then there's the results and like how they act. And she was seeing all these people kind of like bragging about how much their house was going up, but then seeing them like stressed out at work and then unable to actually, and like constantly complaining about, you know,
roof repairs, basement flooding.
Their tenants are like being like acting like jerks, like this, that, and the other, and they would be constantly complaining and this kind of stuff. Versus you see people that talk about like, you know, index investing and they actually have the results that people talk about, even though it's, you know, less, it feels less safe, but it actually is. So it's that deep pessimism and distrustfulness of her character that came from the fact that she grew up in poverty that kind of, I think, drove a lot of that kind of thing. It was also the thing that caused her to be so good at saving, right? Like it used to, like, so this is a good example of like, because I grew up in a middle class scenario, and then she grew up in more poverty kind of thing. When we eat corn, I just go hum nom nom nom, and there's like corn flying everywhere, and the cob is like a mess, and there's like full kernels still like stuck on. When she eats corn, every kernel is picked off clean, right? And she's like, and when we eat chicken wings, it's the same kind of thing, where like I'll have I'll have big chunks of meat that are still on there, while she'll like get every little piece out of that off of there, to like break all the cartilage and suck out the marrow, and like that's thing is part. Clean when she's done with it. Because when poor people eat chicken wings, there ain't nothing left afterwards.
It's funny you say that, because my father is one of 8, and growing up, you know, I would always hear stories. My father would say things like, "Oh, you all don't know what it feels like to go to bed hungry," or they would drink sugar water. And my father, no exaggeration, he can clean a bone on a chicken so good that you're looking like, wait, did I even eat anything? You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I definitely know exactly what you're saying. I grew up like that as well too. But then I've also seen where people can have the scarcity mindset and they stay in that place. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So what was it that they can either run from it and say, hey, I don't want to live this way, or they can actually stay in that place and say, well, this is all that I'm going to be able to do. You know, this is what life has dealt me. So how did you change that mindset from how you were raised to now becoming this millionaire at the age of 30, 31?
That is a really good point. And that's one of the things that we mentioned in the book, that it's like, scarcity mindset is good for survival in the beginning, right? Like, and the thing is, when people dump on the scarcity mindset, it's like, everybody who has the scarcity mindset didn't want to have that mindset. It's because of necessity. Like, we had limited resources. But it is harmful. There's a point of diminishing returns in which it's like, I'm just going to put all my money in savings accounts and then be done with it. But then what you don't realize is that it's not actually safe, because you're losing money to inflation every year, right? So to get from that mindset to like the abundance mindset and the freedom mindset, which is what allowed us to actually retire and actually have all this freedom, is actually, I credit a lot of that from coming from Bryce, because he has the middle class mindset, and his thinking, like my thinking of investing in the stock market, is like, oh my God, my money is going to disappear and I'm never going to have another dollar again, right? And his thinking is like, this is for the long term. It's just temporary, and later on you will have that and more when it rebounds.
Because we have to understand that the stock market is volatile. I mean, like when Trump opens this big yap and says something stupid, and the stock market like drops by like a couple percentage points. When you have like, you know, $10,000 in the stock market, that's like one thing. But when you have $1 million invested in the stock market, 1% of that is $10,000, and a 1% drop happens like regularly, right? So you have to be comfortable with the fact that, with the faith that, again, index funds can't go to zero effectively, and because it represents the totality of all companies in the U.S. or Europe or, you know, wherever. And people go to work, they make money for the company, and companies get richer as a long-term effect. So you have to kind of have to understand that and know that any dips really are temporary, and you only lose if you sell when you're at a loss. So that's very, very difficult for someone in the scarcity mindset to just be okay with, yeah, I'm down $10,000 today. That's okay. It's like that, because that doesn't feel okay at all, right? Mm-hmm. So while I, you know, whenever we go shopping or whatever, she's in charge. She figures out how much things cost, and she figures out like, oh, what's the best deal for everything like that. But like I had to take the reins when it came to the investing side of it, because I had faith in the academic research, in all like the white papers that I read, and in all like the underlying strategy of modern portfolio theory and index investing. So I had to kind of take the reins on that more. And, you know, even though I was really scared and about to hit that sell out button, I kind of knew that that was the wrong thing to do. And I had to have the faith to that long-term that was going to pay off. And it ended up, it did. We actually spend a lot of time these days with other people who became early retired and millionaires and this kind of stuff. And the pairing is actually quite common, where one person had to grow up in poverty and the other person didn't. And it was that it was kind of that the combination of those two skill sets that allowed them to get there, and it allowed us to get there too. Where, you know, scarcity and poverty was actually, they didn't make it despite their poverty. A lot of them made it because of their poverty. The poverty was a superpower in that it allowed them to save up that initial chunk of money in order to invest it. But it then you had to have another mindset to take it to the next level and to turn that money into what's essentially a passive income stream. Because when you do that, then when your passive income from your portfolio matches how much you need to live, then you don't need your job anymore. That's the point where you can retire. So you really need those two, the two interplay of those two skill sets and those two backgrounds in order to really pull this off.
Yeah. And I don't think it's a flip and a switch in your brain. Like, even for me to get comfortable with the abundance mindset, it's not just like scarcity and like all of a sudden, okay, I'm okay with investing now. It really is kind of, you're wading into the water, like, and then you're learning, and then you're seeing, oh, look, it's actually coming back up. Okay. Yes, this is how investing works. Oh, look, it's also throwing out interest and dividends. It's not just the capital value of the portfolio. And then you just learn, and you actually see the results over time. And then your paranoia and your fears kind of dissipate over time. So this combination, yeah, like if I had not grown up in poverty, I would not have wanted to become financially independent, because it wouldn't have driven me to the point of, I never want to be in that place again, and I want freedom. And I realized that if I don't do this, no one's going to do it for me. Like, I mean, growing up in under a totalitarian government, the government's not there to help you. You do not rely on them for any kind of safety net. You do not rely on them for any kind of pension or, you know, anything when you're old and you can't work anymore and retirement. You can only rely on yourself. So I think a lot of that came from the like my drive to never be poor again, and to not have to rely on anyone, because I don't think that help is going to be there.
Yeah, we find it like amazing when a lot of our friends we're just kind of, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? And they're like, I'm sure it'll be fine. The government will come and help. The government will save me. The government will come and help me.
The company will take care of me. Yeah.
I was like, historically, culturally, for Chinese people, the government is not here to help you. They are here to make things immeasurably worse. I mean, like, from your background too, the government is not here to help. The government is here to like break down your door and drag you off to prison. I mean, like that, like the government is not, like, there is this fundamental distrust that anyone is going to come save you that we have. And that's kind of what also drove like a lot of people to accumulate a lot of money, because they never want to rely on anyone ever again.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
What do you want for your family? It's time to make a decision. Taking care of your financial well-being while building trust with your spouse doesn't have to be tough, and learning how to do it won't cost you a fortune. Tala and Ty McNeely, the creators of His and Her Money, present to you Power Couples University. Imagine if you reduce financial stress and take control of your life. Come be equipped with the tools for money management, wealth building, relationship wellness, and entrepreneurship. Get access to online courses, live Q&A sessions with Tala and Ty McNeely, a private accountability group, and expert masterclass sessions from the world's smartest money and entrepreneurship experts. Don't wait. It's time to make a decision. Power Couples University. Visit powercouplesuniversity.com for more details.
And now, back to the show.
A lot of couples that listen to our show. And, you know, as I hear you all's story, we hear the back end, we hear the result. But you all had two different perspectives on money based on how you were raised. And later on, you all were able to figure out that each one of you, you know, for lack of a better term, have a superpower. You know, Bryce handled the investing. Christy handled the money management, finding different ways to save so that would free up cash so that Bryce could have the money to invest. But man, how did you all come to trust each other, right? Because you all had two strong viewpoints. Like, I need to save every dollar. I need to invest every dollar. How did you all enter into those conversations with each other? Because I think that for in many, it shows up in many different forms. Rarely do you have two people in one relationship who see money the same way.
Right.
You have someone who's more prone to spend, or more prone to save, or more prone to invest, and more prone to cut coupons, which are different mentalities. How did you all figure out how to make your two mentalities synergize into one goal?
I just bashed him over the head until he did what I said. So.
Anyway,
no, seriously. I think the matter of the actual real reason is that we both come from an engineering background. Okay, so that's another part of my story that I talk about in the book. I didn't pick engineering because that's what I wanted to do. I picked engineering because strategically it made sense financially, so that I wouldn't have to rely on my parents. So we talked about something called the pay over tuition score, which I'll go over.
POT score.
POT score, yes, exactly. So that was what allowed me to strategically make this decision that was going to help me financially. And I think having the engineering mindset, like we both went through this, we went to the same university, and having developed that mindset of like, instead of just relying on feelings and what makes sense and your upbringing, do the math. Like we always say, like, math shit up on the blog, right? So it's like the math will show you the way. And if it's the right way, convince me with math that this is the right way to go. Like convince me with logic that this is the right way to go, even if we come from very different backgrounds. So when he showed me that spreadsheet, and I was like, your math is wrong. But then I checked it again and again and again. And I was like, no, I can't argue against this. This is correct. The math is the right way to go. So even though I had that scarcity mindset, I was trusting in the math that this was going to work out.
So that was a very Asian response, meaning that we communicated using math.
Yes, exactly.
And that was how we came to a consensus. So there's an example of like, okay, so we talked about like kind of her time in poverty, but there was actually a point in which she was a hoarder, right?
Oh yeah.
Because the thing that happens with a lot of people who came from poverty is when they actually do have money, they're like, oh hell yeah, I'm gonna buy all the things now. So that's
the immigrant rebound effect.
We call it the immigrant rebound effect when they have money. So she went off and started buying purses. So this is her thing in which
designer
she started
purses.
like she got like designer purses, and she had like 4 or 5 of them, and she would open it up and smell it and like coo over the metal bits and like this kind of stuff.
Creepy.
Crazy. Just acting like an insane person.
Acting crazy, yeah.
And it got to a point where our apartment was just filled up with stuff, and things were just spilling out of the closets. So rather than yell at her and kind of say, well, this is a bad idea, I kind of said, okay, well, clearly there's not enough space here. Let's look at maybe moving to another place that's a little bit bigger. And then she went, okay, fine. So we went out and started looking at bigger places, and then seeing how much more it would cost us in rent and this kind of stuff. And I kind of showed her, and then she came to the conclusion that the amount that you would end up paying for the amount additional that you would pay for the extra space to store your stuff was more than the value of all that stuff. Like it would cost like $400 or $500 more a month, but the total cost of all this extra gunk that she was refusing to throw away was less than $400 or $500, right? So it didn't make sense to keep paying for storing this stuff every single month just because you refuse to throw it out, or just because you refuse to stop buying more. And at that point, she kind of went, all right, this doesn't make a lot of sense. All right, let's stay where we are and let's start getting rid of stuff. And it was a gradual process, but again, that was a case where like the math kind of showed us the way. Yeah. And
math that shit up.
Manipulating my wife using math is basically the foundation of our marriage.
Yes, manipulation is the foundation of a marriage.
So I know there are people listening who hear your story, and you all, I think a good part of why you all got to where you all had a lot of intentional, strategic decisions that you made up front that allowed you to make certain moves with your money to ultimately hit your goal of $1 million, being able to retire. Now, if someone's listening and is like, man, I wish I would have, had that foresight, but they didn't, and they are where they are today. How would you advise them to kind of back themselves up from where they are? Maybe they're not in position to live on 50% of their income today, but they want to do something to move the needle in the right direction.
Oh, absolutely.
How would you advise them?
Okay, so there's a chapter in our book called You Don't Need $1 Million to Be Free. And what I talk about in there is like I take the average salary, the average US salary, which is around $60,000 per family. And then I do the math in figuring out like how long it takes you to actually retire. But for you to fully retire, maybe that's like 25 years or 30 years. But it's not really about retiring, because financial independence, retire early. We say that the retire early part is optional, and the financial independence part is the part that's important, right? So even if you were partially financially independent, like for example, instead of working a job that, you know, it's like very stressful, maybe you'll go down to part-time, or maybe you'll find a job that's more aligned with your passion but pays less. But then your portfolio generates enough income to cover part of your expenses. That alleviates a lot of stress, right? And not only that, like even just saving enough money for like emergency fund, like just having 6 months of emergency expenses covered, like that's going to relieve a lot of stress. Like unlike my coworker, when he collapsed and almost died at his desk, like he didn't have the emergency fund. So it's like, if I stop working, I'm going to lose everything, right? Just having that 6 months of like, okay, what is the next step? What am I going to do? Like that will reduce your stress a lot. So it really isn't about becoming a millionaire. It isn't really about, you know, fully retiring. It's about using your money to make money and using compounding to your advantage, so that the money that your money is throwing off is going to work harder than you, right? So I would say like take small steps. Like don't just reach for like, I'm going to save $50,000. I'm going to save like 50% of my salary. That's very difficult. Maybe you start saving like $1,000, right? And then once you get that, it's your first milestone. So you like, you know, buy yourself a treat. You need to celebrate every single milestone, right? It's you celebrate. And then maybe the next one, you step it up to like $5,000. And then once you reach that, you pat yourself on the back, and then you step it up to $10,000. So you gradually increase it over time, and you will see that because of compounding, the amount of money that you save ends up snowballing. It's very hard in the beginning, but it's like this kind of like, you know, parabolic function, right? Like once you start saving, then the money makes more money, and then that money makes more money. And then over time it grows. And just having some money in your funds for emergency will make your life a lot easier, right? It really is. I really want to hammer this point home, which is like, don't let your situation limit you. Like one of the things we say a lot is that your past does not define you, right? Like there's a lot of, like, we don't choose to be born into poverty. We don't choose to live under a totalitarian government. Sometimes we get into debt. Sometimes I buy a lot of designer bags that I don't need, right? Just to show off that I have status now and that I have money, that I don't need to feel poor anymore. But none of those things really hurt you in the long run, because if you decide that you're going to make a change now, it only matters what you do now until like the rest of your life. It doesn't matter what happened in the past. You just forget about those things, because you can't change it. And the best thing to do is just move on from that point. And it's like, what am I going to do now?
Yeah, there's a Chinese proverb, or I guess as our people call it,
a proverb.
That the best 2 times to plant an oak tree are 20 years ago and right now, right? So it's like, as long as you start going right now, like the starting point doesn't matter. It's the trajectory that matters, because compound that over time, and then as long as you're making progress in the right direction, you'll eventually get there. But if you give up and kind of say, it's too far, I'm never going to get there, and you don't try, then you definitely won't get there. And what we like to focus on when it comes to like saving money is not to look for like the painful deprivation. Like reporters always ask us, oh, this sounds like really hard. I don't want to cut out my coffee. I don't want to do this and I don't want to do that. And I hate talking about deprivation. Deprivation sucks, because if you talk about, oh, you have to cut things till it hurts, but it's just kind of, are you going to be able to do that forever? And if you do that with the idea of, oh, I'm going to deprive myself now so that I can deprive myself forever in retirement, that's not sustainable. And quite frankly, that's not the point of living. We like to look for opportunities and ways to maintain the same quality of life, or even increase your quality of life, while actually cutting costs. So we look like, so an example of like a recent example of something that we talked to a person at a party about was like, Netflix. This is, so all those like streaming services that people have, But like, you know, Netflix doesn't have all the shows that you want. So you get Netflix, and then you get Hulu, and then you get HBO, and then you get like all these like different things stacked up. And then I was talking to the guy, he's like, man, I'm spending like $100 on like a month on these like streaming services. And I'm like, why don't you just just switch between them, right? Like one month, just have the Netflix membership and watch shows that are exclusive to that streaming service only. And then the next month, suspend it and then switch over to HBO and then go watch your Game of Thrones. And then the next one, and plus that'll give you time for like for you to like miss the other shows on the other platforms, so that when you come back, you're like, oh yay, I'm getting my like whatever. Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt again, this kind of stuff. But because you do, so you don't actually miss out on anything. You still have access to all the same shows that you want. But now instead of paying $100 a month because you have all these subscriptions running concurrently, you're switchblading between them, and then you're spending like $10 a month instead of $100 a month. And there is no gap. There's no deprivation involved on that one, right? So that's a good example of someone. I told someone, he was like, that's a good point. And I was like, there, I just saved you $90 a month, and you didn't, and I didn't ask you to cut anything out. And he's like, okay, sure, I could do that. That seems, yeah, I could do that. And I was like, you know what? And you'll take that $90 that you save a month, next month, take like half of it and go buy yourself something nice. And then now he's like, hey, you know, like, so now he has more money while his happiness has increased. So we always look for opportunities like that where you can spend less money while actually increasing your happiness.
Yeah, another example I'll give you is like a geographic arbitrage example. So it's the idea that you earn money in a high currency, you live in a place with like weak currency. So one of our friends one of our readers that we talked to, the two of them used to live in San Francisco, very expensive. I think he worked in IT, she worked in marketing, but her job was actually completely remote. She only needed to go into the office maybe once or twice a year. And the rest of the time she can just work from home wherever she likes, wherever she wants.
There was
right?
literally no physical location.
Yeah.
They all communicated with like
right.
Slack
so,
or whatever.
So then what we realized is that like, hey, you guys, you know, vacation in Mexico, you can speak Spanish. If you moved to like, if you were traveling in Mexico and then you were working online, because the time difference is pretty much the same, they wouldn't even notice. And she was like, maybe I'll try that out. So they actually did, like when they went back home, they actually moved, took some, just to try it out. They moved to Oaxaca, Mexico to work online. And their rent went from $3,000 a month to like $400 US a month. Wow. And then because of the massive difference in the living expenses, like he didn't really need to work anymore. So he's like, okay, I'm just gonna, you know, follow my passion and do some photography and like, you know, fly some drones around and take video footage. And then like 6 months after this, she started to look at him having all this fun, and she's like, maybe I can get my number to be FI too, and then we can both quit. And they actually did that. Like this year, they actually both became financially independent. They quit their jobs and they're now traveling the world. So that's like an example of a hack where it's like, and you don't even have to move to Mexico. Maybe you're earning money in San Francisco, but then you're living in Richmond, Virginia, where the cost of houses are way, way cheaper. And then you're banking that difference. Like increase the gap between how much you make and your expenses by using location independence. And all of a sudden you're winning by having like a great life. Like when they lived in Oaxaca, Mexico, they had like a lot of fun. Like the weather was great. They were able to go lots of local restaurants. They were able to practice their Spanish.
Eat a lot of tacos.
They did. Tacos. It was really awesome. Yeah. And then they even found out when they moved to like Aruba for a while. Even Aruba was less expensive than living in San Francisco.
Everything is less expensive in San Francisco.
Yeah.
San Francisco.
So you just, you don't know these things until you actually leave the city, and then you're like, oh wow, this is how much things are supposed to cost. I've been living in a bubble this whole time.
Yeah, but so that's another great example of like it has never been easier to find opportunities to do stuff like that, and it's all about finding the ways to reduce your costs while increase your living expenses. So. And that's been the key to like all of this stuff and to be able to do it sustainably.
For context purposes, you all paid the price. You went on this 10-year journey where you guys made lots of sacrifices to get to where you are today. Tell everybody, what are some things you've been able to do as a result of that hard work that you put in up front?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. So as a result of that, we've been traveling the world for the last 4 years. And we actually found out it was less expensive to travel the world than live in a major metropolitan city. Like, this is the mind-blowing thing. I thought it was going to cost us $100,000 to travel the world, because I was looking at our, vacation expenses and saying, well, it's going to cost us, like $5,000 for a week or two. So projected out, it's going to be $100,000. No. The thing is, when you actually travel for vacation, you are stuck traveling from Saturday to Saturday, Sunday to Sunday, because you got to get back to work. And you end up traveling and buying packages because you're like, I don't have time to organize this. I have to work. And then you start going to places that everybody else goes to. You go to London, Paris, New York, Rome, like all the touristy places. And so as a result of not having to work anymore, we actually tried all these different places we never thought of, like Poland, Estonia, Latvia, Chiang Mai, Bangkok, Chiang Mai, Thailand. And just these places we never would have thought of to go when we were going on vacation. And because we split expensive places like, the UK and Switzerland between inexpensive places like Poland and Thailand, we realized that you can live on $25,000 a year US in Thailand for 2 people, and you can get massages every other day. It's like amazing. We got a condo. Yeah, it was crazy. The condo was $600 US a month, and it had a pool, and it was walking distance to everything.
Yeah.
I was like, you can't even get like a parking spot for that
in
like New York. And then not only Thailand, but also Portugal. Like Portugal, we rented just in this January, we rented a condo, 15 minutes walk from the beach, and it was only around like $900 US, right? So then it's like even Portugal, even Western Europe, it's just everybody goes to Lisbon and they don't think of any other place, right? But then there's all these different places where the locals live, and if their average salary is less than €1,000 a month, they're not going to be able to afford the ridiculous expensive lifestyle. So then the cost of living is actually a lot lower than you think it is. So that's one of the magical things we discovered, which is geographic arbitrage. Once we, built, like we got here through hard work for the 10 years, but then now it's been paying off in spades because we've been able to travel the world for 4 years and live on less than how much it would have cost us to live at home.
So the thing when we retired, we shifted our portfolio from a pure indexing approach to one that focused more on yield, which is the money that your portfolio pays you in the form of dividends, interest, and that kind of stuff. And it pays you that, and you don't have to do anything. It pays you that without having to sell anything. When we were in Thailand, we realized that we were able to live off of about $25,000 over a year. And that's below the $35,000 that our portfolio was paying us. So that meant when we were in Thailand, every day we were sitting on a beach, we were making money while vacationing. So I keep telling people that we retired with $1 million. It's 4 years later, we're at 1.3 now. The money's growing even as we're traveling.
Wow.
And we keep telling people that, like, when we realized this, that we were making money sitting on a beach, it was like, oh my God, we have to tell people how this works, because it is so amazing. It's like, it feels like we're cheating. It feels like we're winning at life. And it's just like, it feels like a cheat code.
Yeah, you're playing Mario and you just got that invincibility start.
Yeah. And the thing is, this isn't one of those things where it's just kind of like, ooh, I found the secret, I have to keep it to myself. If you do it too, that doesn't detract from us doing it too. Yeah. So it's not a zero-sum game. It's not a zero-sum game. So it's kind of like, that's why we kind of want to keep telling people how this works, because I want them to come along, because when you figure this stuff out, life becomes so incredibly easy, right? If there's a market downturn, if the market crashes, we just fly to a low-cost area like Portugal or Poland or Portugal or Thailand, and we just wait and we just make money, even though by sitting on a beach, even though the market is like doing these like gyrations, this kind of stuff. Like we keep telling people, like, if you figure out money, life becomes incredibly easy. But if you never figure out money, life is so hard. And the thing is, they don't teach us stuff in schools. It's up to people so that's why we're kind of going around the world kind of evangelizing all this kind of stuff, because it's like, if you figure this out, life is just so damn easy. And it's all just like a few math tricks, and
That's why I love this, and I love your story, and I'm so happy that you guys came on our show to share, because this stuff is not locked up in a vault where nobody can learn it, right?
No,
they put it in a book.
Y'all put it in a book. You're teaching others. You're sharing how you did it. So it's like, now it's our fault if we don't do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Information's out there.
Yeah, it's all out there, and we want.
Yeah, it's like it's there that you can use it. You can choose to not follow it. You can choose to. It's totally up to you, right? So it's just like we want it to be available because like I would have wanted that to be available. Like when I was really stressing out at work, and then to figure all this out, like I would have been so much less stressed if somebody said, "Hey, just do this." Like look at your life. 3 years from now, you'll be totally fine. You're not going to die at your desk. Like that would have been so good in terms of not having to take all the like anxiety medication and the depression medication that I had to take, right? And like a lot of our society now, like I talked to my doctor and she said 80% of her clients before used to have, cancer, hereditary diseases that you have no control over. But now 80% of her clients are coming in because of stress, like work-related disorders, work-related health issues. And we all suffer from this, right? Yeah. We all suffer from this. And a lot of the times it's just, here's some medication, prescribe more medication. And no, that's not the way to solve problems. Like that's just you're gonna be addicted to medication going forward, and it's not gonna be helpful. It's to figure out your life by figuring out money, because money is a tool to help you get freedom. And once you get freedom, you don't need any of those pills. I haven't taken a single pill in the last 3 years. I haven't had to wear a wrist brace that I had to wear every single day while I was working because it got so bad that I had to go to like physio every week. That completely off the table. His doctor gave him a medical exam and said that he was obnoxiously happy. So that's his diagnosis.
When you're just happy and you're just relaxed, it creeps people out because they're just kind of like, what's up?
Going on here? What's going on?
Why are you happy?
Why are you so happy?
Why are you diagnosis? I love it.
Yeah, exactly. Have you have you listened to the news lately? And it's just kind of like, why? What's happening? No, I don't. Not really. Because I don't care about any of that kind of stuff anymore because it doesn't affect me. Like when there's so much stress and anxiety out there in the world that's related to money. I mean, like even all this political stuff that's happening right now. Like when people are scared because they don't have enough money and they're scared for their jobs, it's easy for some politician. And then I'm not naming any particular politician because it's happening in the US, it's happening in Europe, it's happening in all over the place, that politicians are able to say, this group here, they're coming to take your jobs, right?
It's their fault.
It's their fault that you're not happy. It's their fault you don't have enough money. And then people kind of go, yeah, let's elect that guy. And then and then bad things start happening. I mean, like we were in Germany and it was right in the middle of this really bad period of anti-immigrant kind of backlash because there were immigrants coming in from Syria and this kind of stuff, and they were trying to come into Germany, and there were some incidents that happened in which the group started fighting, and then there were people marching in the streets doing the Heil Hitler thing in Germany, and I get really nervous when Germans start doing it.
They're still on timeout.
They're still on timeout. They know what they did. That's not cool.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, and that's the same kind of anxiety that they're feeling because they feel like they don't have enough, and if their jobs go away, that doesn't. Then if they believe that it's someone else's fault, they're going to want to.
It's easy to get manipulated.
It's easy to get manipulated, and if I can just get people to be like financially independent, don't need to work anymore. They have enough. They realize that they can have enough money. Then they're not going to be scared. And if they're not going to be scared, they can't be manipulated. And that's kind of why I'm doing all this kind of stuff. Like we're trying to go out and get this message out as much as possible. We're not doing it for the money because again, we don't need the money. But what we want to do is just lower the anxiety and the stress levels of the world. I want people to be happy. I want we care about money. We care so much about money that we even care about your money. I want you guys to retire too. I want you guys to have enough that you don't need to worry about this stuff anymore. Because I want people to be less afraid.
So you all, I mean, you did a masterful job and you all laid it all out in the book. So tell everybody a little bit more about the book and what they'll find when they pick up their copy.
For sure. Okay, so the book is organized in 3 sections. So it starts off in poverty, goes into middle class, and finally ends up with becoming rich. So we wanted to tell the story from because we have a fiction writing background. That's always my dream to become like a children's author. Did that a little bit on the side while I was working as an engineer. So we told the story kind of from my background of how I went from growing up in poverty and living with my parents on 44 cents US a day at one point to becoming a millionaire. And it's actually a series of lessons that compound together. And it's not that complicated. It's not easy, but it's also compound lessons that are simple, but you need to learn it throughout the period as you read the book. So for people who are reading this book, when you pick up the book, it's like we want it to be as easy as possible, and we want to reach people that don't normally read finance books. Because of the finance books that we read when we were learning how to invest, it's like very dense. It's very hard to get through.
Very technical.
Very technical. It's basically a textbook. We want this to not be an assignment. We want it to be easy, fun to read, and entertaining. So basically, like what I did, I don't think I'm special at all. Like I'm not even that smart. Like when I went to university, I didn't know my ass from a hole in the ground. So if I can do this, you can do this too. And if you follow my journey, like going through those different sections, you will be able to become a millionaire if you follow my steps. Because I'm not special. I really am not.
Just like, so it's structured such that, like, because her life story spawns the socioeconomic spectrum, wherever the reader is in that socioeconomic spectrum, if they can just kind of figure out, okay, here's where I am matched up to her, to her story. And if you just copy her moves going forward, you'll wind up at the same place. Because again, no, we didn't do anything special. We didn't, start the next Snapchat or like buy real estate in Detroit when it was like $4. Like there was nothing in there that we did that you can't do now. And and that's the power of the story. It's reproducible. So if you just copy our moves, you'll wind up a millionaire.
Awesome. The book is called Quit Like a Millionaire. We'll have a link to it in the show notes of this episode. Bryce, Christy, woo! This has been powerful, man. Y'all shared an awesome story, and we really appreciate you taking time to make this happen today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us on the show.